Thank you that we can be here once again, Lord, to worship you, to praise you, and to also hear from your word. Lord, we pray that your Holy Spirit will be amongst us now. Lord, this is a high Sabbath, a great day because there's celebration in heaven. I am reminded of the story in Luke 15 of the sheep that was lost, the 99 that stayed, but the one that went away. I am reminded of the story right after that of the one coin of the 10 that was lost. I'm reminded of the story right after that of the one son that left. And every single time when the sheep came back, when the coin was found and when the son was found, there was great celebration. So I know that there is great celebration, not only in our hearts, not only here today at this church, but in heaven, because one of your children has committed himself to you. And we say thank you for that. Lord, as we proceed with this service, we pray that your Spirit will not only work in our hearts, Lord, but it will also work in our minds, Lord, to shift our paradigm so that we can view the story of Scripture as our story. That it won't just be a story in a book, but that it will be our story that is lived in our lives in 2019. Bless and keep us now is my prayer in your name. Amen. Good morning once again. We're glad that you all are here for this high Sabbath. We will celebrate, I think, very aptly the covenant. So we are in our series called You Lost Me at Leviticus. This is the third installment, and so we are glad that you have joined us. This week was Valentine's Day. I see some of the men looking down. Was it a bad Valentine's? Did you forget? Did everybody remember? Did you have a good Valentine's Day? Right? Who didn't have a good Valentine? Who doesn't celebrate Valentine's Day? Right, a few there, okay. But it was Valentine's Day, and Valentine's Day is generally the time that we remember what? Love, right? Somebody said this week they actually dislike Valentine's Day because you hear of all the husbands telling their wives how much they love them, but the rest of the year you don't hear anything, right? But Valentine's is that time that we're reminded to tell the significant other that we love them, right? And sometimes people do crazy stuff at Valentine's. You see some people buying a bunch of balloons. I saw a video this week of a guy that I don't know how many balloons, probably like 20 or 30 balloons with a little puppy, right? He tied the balloons to the puppy. So you see all these balloons walking and suddenly this little puppy comes around the corner. Oh, and the girl is so happy because she's always wanted a puppy, right? And she was all over the place of excitement. People do crazy stuff at Valentine's. What is the craziest thing that you've done at a Valentine's? Well, let me rather ask this. What is the craziest thing that you've ever done for love? Right? What is the craziest thing that you've done? Are you kind of adventurous that do something? There's this guy called Marcel de Leclerc, and he was just besotted on this woman. And he loved her so much, and he wanted to demonstrate his love to her. So we decided to do something that I think all of us at one point in our life has decided or has done, is to write her a love letter. Have you ever written a love letter? In the day of technology, we just send a WhatsApp, maybe a voice note if you're feeling very romantic, right? But he was saying, no, I'm going to write her a letter. And the year was 1875. And so he says he's going to write her a letter, but he's not going to write it. He's going to get a scribe to write it down as he dictates it. Right? But here's the catch. The letter was only composed of 3 words. I love you. The whole letter. I love you. But it's 1875, so he said, I want you to write it down 1,000 times for every year. So the first letter, he dictated the words, I love you, 1,875,000 times. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Imagine that scribe. I love you. Okay, I get it, right? I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. But he was so besotted with this woman, and he loved this idea of loving her. So he said to the guy, after I have written it, after I have said it 1,875,000 times, I want you to read it back to me. Imagine that. But the guy did it. So in total, by saying it, by writing it down, and by repeating it, 5,625,000 times the word I love you was proclaimed to this girl. Crazy stuff, isn't it? What is the craziest thing that you've ever done for love? Now, ladies, if a man sends you that kind of letter, I would imagine that you phone a doctor that specializes in crazy. You know what I mean? But there is another story I want to tell you. A story of this painting. This is a painting done by Rossetti. Although he sounds Italian, he was actually a British painter, and he painted this picture, and this picture has a beautiful story to it. It's a story of two individuals that loved each other so much, that cared for each other, and they met each other in a small little rural town in England, and they loved each other, and they proclaimed their love to each other, and they were just really smitten. And so he said to her, "I love you forever." And they kept on, not a million times, but a few times. They went back and forth. But as they grew, he knew that this was the one for him, and she knew that this guy was for her. But eventually, she started to meet other people, and these people said to her, "Hey, have you ever been to the big city, London? Have you ever been there? Have you ever gone? I mean, that's the life. This small rural town is not for you, girl. You go out there and you live your best life." And so she went to the big city, and while she was there, she kind of forgot about this man that said that he loved her with everything. And a few years went on, and she fell into the wrong crowd, eventually went backwards in her ways, and at the end of the story, she was actually a prostitute. She was selling herself on the streets to any guy that would come by and give her a buck. And so one day, this man was going to town for business, and as he was walking there, and if you have ever been to London, you'll see that bridge at the back one is the Blackfriars Bridge. So he's there close to the Blackfriars Bridge. As he's walking there, suddenly he sees the outlines of something that he's seen before. And suddenly he starts to remember a face that he looked in so pensively so many times for so many years, and said those beautiful words, "I love you." And he said, "But could it be? Is it her?" And so he rushed, and this is the story, this is the picture of this man rushing to this lady that he loved so much, and he's holding her and said, but I am yours still. I have not married anybody else. I have not given myself to anybody else. I still love you. Come home with me. Come back to this place of our residence. Come back to where you grew up. Come back to the place where our love was started, because my love has never waned for you. Is that not a beautiful story? The story of this painting? In one sense, this story, although it's just a story, is almost very akin to the core of the gospel, the core of the story that we've been unraveling. So we've been busy, and this week we are discussing the covenant. And you've never maybe even heard of the word covenant, but covenant is that kind of outline, that structure, that kind of core thing that everything is attached to in Scripture. It's the grand narrative. So we started with this idea of the creation story, the story of a good God that creates a good place. He creates everything, and He says everything is so good, and He is in perfect relationship with humanity, and humanity is in perfect relationship with each other. But then last week we look at the chaos, the crisis that came, where Adam and Eve fell into sin because Satan, the serpent, deceived them. He came and he started to let them doubt in their minds and desire with their hearts, so they disobeyed with their hands. And so through the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, they desired to be like God. So they gave up what God gave them and said, no, you are not the God of our lives anymore. We are the God of our lives. And so they sold their souls. And this world was plunged into chaos. Now, the thing about the covenant is that it's a bit anachronistic in this section, in this story, in this timeline. We have creation and crisis and covenant and Christ. But in one sense, the covenant actually spans before creation and will span after the consummation. It is the thing that holds everything together. If you look, this is the kind of story. And if you have, I hope all of you received a little booklet like this, or a little pamphlet like this. If you didn't, and if there's any extra, just raise your hand. I think there should be some. If you look in there, you'll see that there's a few names there. These are the covenants of the Old Testament. So in one sense, what we need to do here, and I don't have a lot of time, is to actually talk about, in broad outlines, the whole Old Testament. Because the whole Old Testament revolves around this idea of covenant. We have the covenant with Adam that God makes with him in Genesis chapter 1. But then in Genesis chapter 3, we see that there's a covenant again made with Adam because he had now sinned. He had now fallen. And then Genesis chapter 6, just a few chapters after that, the first word in Scripture is given where it says, and God will make a covenant with Noah. But Noah is this type of Adam. He is this new guy that God says, I will recreate the earth in a sense through the flood. But just like Adam that had taken of the fruit illegitimately, Noah takes of the fruit illegitimately and becomes drunk and sins. So he falls. Then God calls this man called Abraham. And God says to him, Abraham, I will call you. You will be my people. I will through you bless the world. And through you, the seed that is spoken of in Genesis chapter 3, the one that will liberate us, will come through you, your people. But we know that Abraham also messed up, didn't he? He also didn't do what he was supposed to do. He had a son with another woman. He made his own plan, so that didn't work. Then comes David. God says that David, I will make a covenant with you, but once again we know that David was a sinner, and he also did something wrong. And then there's the new covenant. Jeremiah. And the new covenant is this covenant that Jesus ushers in. And if you look at this page, you will see that there on the second page it says the DNA markers of a covenant. The DNA markers is the kind of root elements of the covenant. And if you really go look at it, the covenant has never changed. The covenant has always been the same. God is the one that loves us. He wants to reconcile himself to us because there's something that brought division. There's something that brought separation. So he wants to reconcile with us. So he needs to justify us, take away the penalty of sin. And then when he's done with the penalty of sin, he wants to sanctify us. He wants to take away the power of sin that's within every person's heart. And when he does that, he calls us to mission, to send us out. And that was the mission of all the covenants. Now, I can spend a lot of hours here explaining all the covenants to you, explaining all the nuances to each of the covenants, and you will walk out and say, whoa, that was really good theology. But I'm going to tell you one story that I think encapsulates the core of the gospel. It's a story that comes at the end almost of the Old Testament. Now, if you know Old Testament history, or if you don't, the Old Testament history worked in certain cycles, certain revolutions, if you will. And one of the things is that God was speaking to his people, constantly saying, you're drifting away, but I'm calling you to come back. You're drifting away, but I'm calling you to come back. And this eventually went on to such a degree that God says, listen, there's people that's going to overcome you, overtake you. We know this as the exile. And the story that I want to tell you is what happened right before the exile, right before they were taken off. It's a story of Hosea. If you have your Bibles, I would ask you to turn there with me to Hosea. Hosea chapter 1. Hosea chapter 1, if you have it. It's in the Old Testament. It's quite a smallish book. Hosea chapter 1. Now Hosea is a book that speaks about the anguish of steadfast love. It talks about this God that pursues us even though we don't always reciprocate. And the story starts off quite interesting. Hosea chapter 1 verse 1, it says, the word of the Lord that came to Hosea, the son of Beeri, the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, the king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. So Jeroboam, this is actually Jeroboam, the second is the king, and he's one of the worst kings. He has led the Israel to move away from God. They're steeped in idolatry. They're steeped in just pagan worship. And so God calls Hosea, his prophet. And when the Lord first spoke through Hosea, so God hasn't revealed himself in another way to Hosea. He hasn't given him a book to write yet. He hasn't given him a mission yet. He says this is the first time that God reveals himself to Hosea. Now, the prophets were the people that God would send to the kings. He send to the people to say, you're on the wrong track. So Hosea, this is a great opportunity for Hosea. He is now a prophet of God. So God reveals himself and says, Hosea. The Lord said to Hosea, go take yourself a wife of harlotry and have children of harlotry. Imagine that. Here comes God and he's talking to his prophet and he says, Hosea, this is your mission. Your mission is not to write a book. Hosea, your mission isn't just to go preach a gospel. Your mission isn't just to proclaim something. No. Go and get yourself a prostitute from the street. What would you do if God came to you and said, hey, I'm calling you for a specific mission. I'm calling you to do something for me. Go marry a prostitute. Oh, is this the same God that we are talking about of Exodus that said we will not do these kind of things? Is this the same God that said that we shall not fornicate? Is this the same God that said that we should only be in monogamous relationship? Is this the same God of Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus, the same God of the laws of Moses? Is this the same God that is calling me, Hosea, to take a prostitute from the street? So God calls him and says, go, Hosea. Take for yourself a wife of harlotry and have children of harlotry. And then he gives the reason. He says, for the land commits flagrant harlotry, forsaking the Lord. God is calling him not to give a message of words, but to give a message with his life. Go and show the people what you are actually doing. He's acting out a parable. God is saying, listen here, let me tell you what the reality is. My people that have committed themselves to me, that have covenanted. Covenant is a word that we use to show that we have made a commitment to each other. It's a relational term in Scripture. It's a thing where you say, I will covenant with you. I will make a vow, a promise. One of the best ways to illustrate this is this idea of marriage. Those of you that are married, you know that when you got married, you stood before your wife and your wife stood before you, and you both made promises to each other. I will love you through good times and bad times, sickness and health. You know, you're making those promises, those declarations to say, this is my commitment, this is my covenant to you. God says that my people, they are my wife. They are the people that have committed themselves to me. They have said to me, I will be your people, God, and you will be my God. But yet these people have committed adultery against me. They have gone off and they have started to prostitute themselves with other pagan gods, to dead gods that don't even exist. So God says, go, Isaiah, show them. And then in verse 4, we have this idea where God gives the reasons and the kind of way that he will operate with them through the children of harlotry. The first one, there's discipline. Jezreel, he says to him in verse 4, he says, name him Jezreel. This is the first son that he will have from this prostitute. He says, name him Jezreel. For a little while I will punish the house of Yehu for the bloodshed of Jezreel. Jezreel was a piece of land between Samaria and Galilee. So God is saying that I will disperse them. That is the first thing that I will do. I will discipline them through dispersing them. I will scatter them. Then the next one there, he says in verse 6, he says, for name her Lo-Ruhamah. This is the second child that she will bear, and I will no longer have compassion on the house of Israel. Lo-Ruhamah means unpitied, no mercy, no compassion. That I will never forgive them. And then the third one, you are not my people. Lo-Ami, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. In a sense, God is saying, listen, Hosea, go and get yourself a wife that is a prostitute, somebody that is selling their body to the cheapest person that they can get, somebody that will just give them money and then they give everything. That is what my people have done. They have sold themselves for cheap pleasures. And what that bores, what it brings to is these three ideas of God will scatter them, and God will have no compassion on them. And God will say that you have broken the covenant with me. It shows us this idea of the cycle that is constantly in the Old Testament is this idea of reproof, reckoning, and restoration. In the Old Testament, there's the cycle that goes through from the day that they sin, from Genesis chapter 4 all the way through. We have the cycle. God sends reproof. He sends his prophets to reprove his people, to say to them, you are messing up, you are sinning, you are moving away from God, and this is going to hurt you. This is going to damage you. But then there will be reckoning. Judgment will come as a consequence of our sin, as a consequence of the stuff that we are doing, as a consequence of cutting ourselves off from God. There will be a reckoning. But God always moves to restoration. He always wants to move to this idea that he wants to restore the covenant. You see, the covenant has two elements to it. The one person making the promises and the other person making the promises. And in the middle is that both of them needs to be faithful to each other. From the moment that God has made the covenant, he has always been faithful to the covenant. If a covenant is broken, it's not because God had broken it, it's because the other people had. Because Israel had, it's because Noah had, it's because Abraham had. They are constantly breaking their promise to God, drifting away. So God says to him, you will have a son, Jezreel, and I will discipline them. You will have another daughter, Lo-Ruhamah, and I will have no more compassion on them. You will have another child, Lo-Ami. And as these three children walk around, as these people see you, Hosea, on the city streets, as they see you at church, they will see at you with this prostitute wife, and they will remember what they have done to me. They will see your children walking around, and they will see what's going to happen if they stay in this state of adultery. Now, when we read this story, we're like, oh God, that's a bit harsh. Isn't this the God of love? Isn't this the God of John 3:16? The God that loved the world so much? Isn't this the God of 1 John 4:8? The God who is love? You see, the story of Isaiah shows this anguish of steadfast love, this frustration almost in God. He loves us so much, but we keep on moving away. And that's why I love the next part in chapter 3. Chapter 3 is the shortest chapter in that book. It says, and the Lord said. Now this word, the Lord, we've spoken about it a lot. It's the covenantal God. It's the word that Moses said, who will I say sent me? And God says, I am who I am. This is the covenantal God. He doesn't say, I am just God. He says, I am the covenantal God. He says, and the Lord said to me, go again. It means that this boy has gone already. This means this wife has gone away and away and away. And Jesus says, God says to him, go again. Go again. Love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as, or just like, the Lord loves the children of Israel. His love doesn't wane when you walk away. His love is steadfast. His love remains. He says, go again. Love a woman who is loved by another man, who is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel. Though they turn to the other gods and love the raisin cakes, even though they love the stuff of the world, even though they follow these things that will never really bring them pleasure and never really fill them up, never really give them meaning in life, they keep on pursuing these things. But go again and pursue. Can you imagine that search of Isaiah? Can you imagine his heart? His wife has left their children, left her husband that has only been good to her, and she goes back to the old way of living, prostituting herself, giving her body to other men every day, in and out, their fingerprints all over her body. Can you imagine this man of God looking for his wife, prowling the city, scouring and searching, looking for his wife? Can you imagine how sullen is that search? How painful is that pursuit? The man of God goes to the most derelict places, the most scantiest places in the town where only drug dealers and sex traffickers call their home, and he goes there to find his wife. It's a place where a man of God shouldn't even enter into. It's a place where a man of God should never be seen, but God says, go again and find her. And so he goes. He goes to find his wife. He goes to the most despicable dump to find his darling. And so verse 2 says, so I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a letech of barley. That should shock you. Here's a man that is married to the wife. They have made a covenantal commitment to each other. They have stood together and said, I will be your husband. I will be your wife. We are one together. And she walks away and God says, go again, go find her. Now we can imagine that he would just walk to her and says, hey, honey, let's go. No. He goes and he sees there on the market plain, prostituting her life, giving her body over to the highest bidder, and he buys her back. Imagine that. He's walking there and he says, hey, that's my wife. And the pimp says, I don't care who she is, she's mine. So if you want her, show me the money. The wife that is already his. He takes the money and he pays for his own wife, one that is already his. He gives money to one that should be so closely united with him. You know, the word Hosea is a shortened version of the word Joshua. And Joshua is the Hebrew equivalent of the Greek word Jesus. So Hosea could also be called Jesus. And isn't that the similar story of what Jesus does for us? We are the people that are covenanted with God. We have committed ourselves to him, and he has committed himself to us. He has said that I will be your God and you will be my people. But what have we done? We have prostituted ourselves with the things of the world. We have said, you will not be my God. I will be my God. Or something else will be my God. And so we have kept on selling ourselves to the highest bidder, the things that bring the most pleasure to us, the fleeting little pleasures. And so we keep on selling ourselves for these fleeting pleasures. And Jesus says, but you are mine. I created you, Genesis chapter 1. I created you, Genesis chapter 2. But you chose to go away. And so I will covenant, no matter what you do, I covenant that I will save you. I covenant that I will be with you. I covenant that I will always be faithful to the covenant. I will always be your God if you will be my people. And so the story of Isaiah is the story of Jesus that comes, even though he is the creator of us, even though it says that Paul says that in him we live and move and have our being. John says that in the beginning he is the one that created everything. We know that Jesus is the creator of everything, but he is also the redeemer of our souls. He created us, but then on the cross he says, I will buy them back. I will redeem them from the marketplace of sin. I will take them back for myself. I will buy them for myself. Verse 3 says, and I said to her, you must dwell as mine for many days. He's renewing the covenant here with her. You shall not play the whore or belong to another man, so I will also be to you. He's renewing the covenant. Can you just imagine? Here comes this guy to the most derelict places in the city. He's walking around. People are gasping. What is this man doing here? He's going to find his wife. He finally gets there. He puts the money down, says, she is mine. She is there cowering in a corner. There's just shame all over her face, plastered all over her. How can this man love me so much? I've hurt him so much. I've done so many bad things. But he says, no. I will covenant with you again here today. I will covenant with you that you will be mine. Stop this bad living. Come to me. And then Hosea moves to the larger picture, verse 4. It says, for the children of Israel shall dwell in many days. For the children of Israel shall dwell many days without a king or a prince, without sacrifice, or without a pillar, without ephod or household gods. Afterwards, so speaking about the exile that would still come, and then it says, afterwards the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God, and David their king. And they shall come in fear to the Lord and to his goodness in the latter days. It's talking about these people that will find their God again, that will commit to them again, that they will have this covenantal experience again. If you look at this bigger story, you'll see there that right in the middle, the cross, is the place where the covenant faithfulness is revealed. It's where we can look back and say, but God, you still love me? After everything that I have done, I have sunken so low. I have done these bad things. My hands are dirty. My lips are filthy. My mind is continually thinking about things. My heart desires what I shouldn't desire. How can you even love me? But Jesus said, just look at the cross. I have covenanted to love you more than anything else. That's what the cross is there, to remind us of what Jesus. It reminds you of a story of an Asian couple. They lived in China, and during this time, there were still arranged marriages. And so the father of the two couples, or the two individuals, they came together and they had negotiations, and so they were talking to each other. And so they said, this is a good match for us. The mother and the fathers, they were both of them were happy that these two individuals would be the perfect couple for each other. And so they finally arranged the marriage. He had never seen her before. She had never seen him before. They've only heard about each other. And so they spoke and they said, okay, the wedding is going to be this day. And so finally the day arrived and she came walking down. He was standing up front. He was so happy, so excited. This is the big day, one of the biggest days of his life. And so, as most brides, she has a veil on her face, and she came down. And as she stepped up and took off the veil, he saw she had the most horrific face. Her face had been marred and scarred through a disease that she had had, and so she was not outwardly pretty. So he shrieked and he ran off to his chambers, and this was quite embarrassing to the family. And so the mom and the dad went to the family, to his room, to his chambers. He said, what are you doing? You're bringing great shame on us. So he said, no, I cannot marry her. I cannot marry her. She is hideous. She is ugly. I want a beautiful wife. So his mom says, beauty is only skin deep. She's the most beautiful person that you'll ever meet. He says, I don't care. I want a beautiful wife to look at. But unfortunately, he couldn't get out of the marriage. The negotiations had already been made, and so he was forced to marry her. And so they married, and she tried to show him so much that she loved him. She did everything, but he just treated her terrible. There were moments that they were happy for short periods of time, but they weren't really connecting with each other. And they had a child, and a few years later, the dad feels there's something wrong with his eye. He cannot focus so well. He cannot see so well. So he goes to the doctor, and the doctor says to him, listen, there's a big problem. You have a problem with your cornea. Now, it's not impossible to fix this, but there's two problems. It's a very expensive surgery, and number two is that the cornea transplant list is extremely long. So he says, okay. He goes back, he tells his wife, listen here, the doctor said, I have a problem with my cornea. If I don't get this operation, I'm probably going to go blind. But we don't have money. And the list is extremely long. So she says, no. We'll make a plan. We'll do something. The money is not a problem. I will work hard. We will get the money together. We will make a plan. He says, but what about the list of the eye, the cornea? She says, don't worry about that. That will come in its own time. Don't worry about that now. Let's just focus on the money. And so she started grafting hard. She took on extra work. She started making extra stuff every day, worked her fingers to the bone to have enough money to pay for the operation. Day in and day out, she would work and she would work and she would work. Eventually, one day, they looked at the bank statement, and finally there was enough money in the bank. And as fate would have it, just as they had enough money, the phone call came. Listen here, we have a cornea for you. The man is excited. He goes to the hospital. He has the operation, and now he has bandages on his eyes sitting there. And so his daughter goes to visit him and says, Dad, how are you feeling? He says, well, I can't see it. The doctor said it will take a few days when they take off the gauze and the bandages, and then I'll start seeing slowly but surely. She says, oh, that's great. But how else are you feeling? No, I'm fine. I'm just so grateful to be able to have this op. Oh, that's great. Dad, can Mom come? No. Don't bring your mother. I don't want people to see her with me. Okay, fine. A few days later, eventually the bandages off. The dad can see kind of a bit. He just outlines the stuff. And so the daughter comes again. Dad, how are you feeling? How's the eyes? Oh, it's getting better. Great. Can Mom come and visit? No, please don't bring her. Don't bring her. A few days went. After that, the doctor said, okay, you can see it's getting better. You can go home. So the daughter came again to visit. Dad, that's great news. Can Mom come? No, I don't want her here. I don't want people to see her with me. Dad is feeling ready to go and ready to go home, and the daughter comes to pick him up one day, and they're driving home, and she's asking him, "Can you see this? Can you see this?" And they get home and they get into the house, and the mom's at the basin washing the dishes. And so she's washing back towards her dad, and he comes in, and he doesn't really greet her, just, hi, how are you? And at this point, there's tension in the house. You can almost feel it, and the daughter walks in, and she sees the way that the dad greets the mother, and she says, I cannot take this anymore. Mom, why don't you just tell him? Tell him what? If it's about the money, I will work back. I will pay you back every cent. Oh, Dad, it's not about the money. Mom, why don't you tell him? Tell me what? Mom, just tell him. Tell him that it's your cornea that you have. It's your cornea that you sacrificed for the dad to be able to see. Tell him that you are now blind. That you sacrificed your own sight for his. And the dad just started to weep and fell down at her feet and said, why did you do this? Why did you do this for me? And she said, so that you can see how much I love you. So that you can see how much I love you. The cross is a testament of how much God loves us. The cross is a way for Jesus to see how much I love you. How much I love you. See that the cross is a symbol of the covenant, of covenantal faithfulness of me towards you. I will be your God. Will you be my people? That's the thing that God is calling us to today. He's calling each of us to say, will you be my people? Will you covenant with me? Will you make this promise to say, I will be your people? Today, this is what Gareth is going to do. Gareth is going to say, listen here, I covenant with God. This is as important as his marriage day, as his wedding day, where he says, he covenants with Aaron to say, I will be your husband. He is covenanting with God today to say, I covenant that you will be my God and I will be your people. I will be the one that follows you. I commit my life to you and you alone. You are the King of the universe. You are the King of the church, and you are the King of my life. This is a symbol of covenant. This is a symbol of somebody sacrificing and saying, no more where I am the God of my life. There is only one God, and His name is Jesus. Amen.